Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. If you've subscribed for more stories, enjoy the ride now. The morning readings on Kepler 186f were the same as they'd been for the past 8 months, atmospheric pressure stable, temperature within human tolerance, and absolutely zero signs of biological activity anywhere on the planet's surface. Dr. Elena Voss stared at the data streaming across her monitoring station and sighed. Another thrilling day in paradise, she muttered to the empty research station. Population, 1 slightly unhinged xenobiologist and whatever microbes might be hiding in the water recycling system. Kepler 186f had once been classified as a super-Earth with a thriving biosphere. The automated probes sent decades earlier had detected complex ecosystems, atmospheric signatures indicating photosynthetic processes, and even what appeared to be organized agricultural patterns. By the time Elena had arrived as part of the advanced research team, they'd found a world that looked like it had been flash-frozen in crystal. Not literally frozen, the temperature was perfectly comfortable. But every tree, every blade of what had presumably been grass, every flower and vine and microscopic organism had been transformed into some kind of biocrystalline structure that preserved their shape while showing no signs of life whatsoever. It's like someone hit the pause button on an entire planet, Elena said to her audio log, a habit she'd developed to maintain some semblance of human conversation. The crystallization appears to be some kind of preservation process, but preservation of what? And why? She gathered her field equipment and prepared for another day of sample collection and analysis. The rest of the research team had been recalled after 6 months of finding nothing but more crystal formations, but Elena had volunteered to stay behind. Partly because someone needed to monitor the situation, and partly because she had a theory that everyone else thought was completely insane. Elena believed the planet was still alive. Not in the conventional biological sense, but as some kind of quantum consciousness that existed in the crystalline structures themselves. Her bioresonance field detectors had been picking up faint signals that seemed too organized to be random, too complex to be simple mineral formations responding to planetary magnetic fields. Day 247, she said to her recorder as she hiked toward the former ocean basin. Still no luck convincing my colleagues that a planet can have a nervous system, but the quantum field fluctuations in the crystal formations continue to suggest organized information processing. The ocean basin stretched out before her like a vast museum of marine life. Coral reefs stood in perfect crystalline detail, schools of fish frozen mid-swim in transparent formations that caught the alien sun's light and threw rainbow patterns across the seafloor. It was beautiful in a deeply unsettling way, like walking through a graveyard made of diamonds. Elena made her way to the sector she'd been mapping, an area where the quantum readings seemed particularly active. Her equipment detected the same faint bioresonance fields, but stronger here, more coherent. Almost like... Well, hello there, she breathed. Hidden among the crystal formations of what had once been a kelp forest was something that definitely hadn't been there the day before. It looked humanoid but clearly wasn't human, tall and slender with translucent skin that showed delicate networks of what might have been circulatory systems. Instead of normal ears, it had appendages that looked like stylized leaves, elegant and pointed. And it was breathing. Elena approached carefully, her bioscanners indicating life signs that were weak but definitely present. The being appeared to be connected to the surrounding crystal formations by thread-like structures that pulsed with the same faint light she'd been detecting in her quantum field readings. Okay, she said, setting down her equipment, this is either the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history, or I've finally cracked from 8 months of isolation and started hallucinating aliens. The being's eyes fluttered open, large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to contain depths of starlight. They focused on Elena with what looked like surprise, then something that might have been relief. Human, the being whispered in a voice like wind through crystal chimes. The word was perfectly pronounced standard Galactic, which raised a whole host of questions Elena didn't have time to consider. That's me, Elena said, kneeling beside the alien. Dr. Elena Voss, xenobiologist and apparently the only person left on this planet who isn't made of crystal. Are you hurt? Can you move? The being tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back among the crystal formations. Weak. The network, failing. I am, the last. Elena's medical scanner confirmed what she could see, the alien's vital signs were erratic and declining. Whatever had happened to this world, this being was dying from it. Right, she said, switching into professional mode. Let's see what we can do about that. Elena began setting up her portable medical station, designed for emergency treatment of unknown alien physiologies. The bioscanner indicated that the being's circulatory system was based on some kind of conductive fluid rather than blood, and their nervous system seemed to extend beyond their body into the surrounding crystal formations. This is going to sound like a strange question, Elena said as she worked, but are you part of this crystal network? We, were the network. Planet Mind. All connected. All, one song. The being's leaf-like appendages twitched weakly. Song stopped. Network broken. All gone except you. Last note of a dead symphony. Elena felt her heart clench at the profound sadness in those words. Well, then we'd better make sure that last note doesn't fade away, shouldn't we? She activated her bioresonance field generator, a piece of experimental equipment she designed to study the quantum signatures of living systems. The field was supposed to help stabilize biological processes in alien organisms by providing a harmonic foundation for their natural rhythms. The effect was immediate and unexpected. As soon as the field enveloped both Elena and the alien being, the surrounding crystals began to pulse with brighter light. The thread-like connections extending from the being's body suddenly flared with energy, and Elena felt a tingling sensation that started in her fingertips and spread throughout her entire nervous system. Whoa, she said, watching her own bio-readings spike dramatically. That's new. The alien's eyes widened, their multifaceted surfaces reflecting the growing light from the crystals. You resonate. Your mind song, it harmonizes. My mind song. Elena looked at her bioscanner, which was showing readings she'd never seen before. What's happening to us? Connection, the being said, and suddenly Elena could sense their thoughts alongside her own. Not intruding, but present, like hearing a distant melody that somehow perfectly complemented music she was already humming. Okay, that's definitely new. Elena checked her equipment to make sure it wasn't malfunctioning. Are you doing this? The telepathy thing? Not telepathy. Resonance. Your biofield matches quantum frequencies of the network. You can touch the planet mind. Elena looked around at the crystal formations, which were now pulsing in synchronized patterns like a vast, slow heartbeat. The planet has a mind. Had. Has. Network damaged. Song broken. The being struggled to sit up, and this time succeeded. But your presence creates bridge. Allows connection. Connection to what? To everything that was. Everything that could be again. Elena felt something shift in her consciousness, as if someone had just opened a door in her mind that she hadn't known existed. Suddenly she could sense the vast network of crystalline structures stretching across the planet's surface, all of them connected by quantum fields that had been disrupted but not destroyed. My God, she breathed. The crystals aren't just preserving the biosphere. They are the biosphere. A quantum biological network spanning the entire planet. Yes. We were gardeners. Tenders of the world song. Until the discord came. Discord? Stellar radiation. 3 cycles ago. Disrupted quantum harmonics. Network fractured. Planet mind, shattered. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she sensed the magnitude of the loss, an entire planetary consciousness, billions of interconnected minds, all silenced in a cosmic accident. But you survived. Barely. In deepest network nodes. Waiting for. The being looked at her with those deep, starlight eyes. Waiting for you. Me specifically. One who could resonate. One who could help repair the song. Elena looked at her bioscanner readings, then at the brightening crystals around them, then at this impossible being who had somehow been waiting for her to arrive. "You know what?" she said, "I came to this planet to study impossible biology. I guess I found it." The being smiled, an expression that transformed their translucent features with warm light. "I am Sage. Last gardener of Kepler, 186F. Elena. Xenobiologist and apparently the galaxy's most unlikely planetary restoration specialist. Will you help, Elena? Will you help us sing the world back to life?" Elena looked around at the crystal formations, now pulsing with gentle rhythms that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. She thought about her colleagues back on Earth, who would probably declare her insane for even considering what Sage was asking. Then she thought about an entire world waiting in crystalline silence for someone to help it remember how to live. "You know what, Sage," she said, reaching out to take the alien's hand. "I thought you'd never ask." The moment their fingers touched, light exploded through the crystal network like lightning made of starlight, and Elena felt her consciousness expand beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. Somewhere in the depths of her mind, she thought she heard the first few notes of a song that had been waiting 8 months for someone to help it remember how to sing. Elena woke up 3 hours later with the distinct feeling that someone had rewired her brain while she was unconscious. The crystalline formations around her were still glowing softly, and Sage was sitting cross-legged nearby, looking considerably more alive than they had when she'd first found them. "Well," Elena said, sitting up and immediately regretting it as her head spun, "that was either the most intense neural interface experience of my career, or I just had the weirdest dream about becoming one with a planetary consciousness." "Both," Sage said, their leaf-like appendages rustling with what Elena was learning to recognize as amusement. "Your neural patterns are very loud. It took time to establish proper harmonic balance." "Loud?" Elena checked her bioscanner, which showed readings that suggested her nervous system had been through something comparable to a moderate electrical storm. "What do you mean, loud?" "Human consciousness operates at much higher frequencies than our network. Like, trying to tune a symphony when someone is playing electric guitar through maximum amplification." Elena laughed despite everything. "So I'm basically the heavy metal musician of interspecies neural interfacing?" "That is an apt comparison, yes." "Great. I'll add it to my resume." Elena stood up carefully, pleased to discover that the world only spun slightly around her. "So what exactly happened when we connected?" "Because I have some very strange memories that might be yours instead of mine." Sage's expression grew more serious. "I showed you the network as it was. The planet mind before the Discord. Did you understand what you saw?" Elena closed her eyes and tried to process the flood of images and sensations that had filled her consciousness during the connection. She remembered seeing Kepler, 186F as it had been, not just alive, but aware. Every plant, every animal, every microscopic organism connected through quantum fields into a vast biological intelligence that spanned continents. "Your people weren't just living on the planet," she said slowly. "You were the planet. Billions of individual consciousnesses all contributing to a larger awareness. Yes. We were gardeners of ourselves. Tenders of our own consciousness. The network allowed perfect harmony between all life forms. And then the stellar radiation burst disrupted the quantum fields. The harmonic frequencies that maintained network coherence were scattered. Without the unifying song, individual nodes began to disconnect. The planet mind, fragmented." Elena looked around at the crystal formations, now understanding them in an entirely different context. The crystallization wasn't death. It was a preservation protocol. The network tried to save what it could by putting everything into stasis. Waiting. Hoping. Someone who could restore the song would come. "But how could you know that someone like me would even exist? How could you know that humans could interface with your network?" Sage's multifaceted eyes reflected the crystal light in patterns that seemed almost like musical notation. We did not know. We hoped. The network's final calculation suggested that consciousness capable of harmonic resonance might evolve elsewhere in the galaxy. So you basically froze an entire planet on the off chance that someday, someone might show up who could help you fix it. Hope is a powerful force, Elena. Sometimes it is the only force. Elena felt a surge of emotion that might have been her own or might have been resonance from Sage's consciousness. That's either the most optimistic thing I've ever heard, or the most desperate. Perhaps both. Elena walked among the crystal formations, now seeing them not as a frozen museum but as a patient waiting room full of life suspended between existence and non-existence. So what happens now? How do we restore a planetary consciousness that's been shattered for 3 years? Carefully, Sage said, moving to join her. The network nodes are still intact, but they need harmonic guidance to re-establish connections. Your neural patterns can provide that guidance, but full restoration would require permanent integration with the network. You would become part of the planet mind. Elena stopped walking. Meaning I'd lose my individual consciousness? Not lose. Expand. Your thoughts, your memories, your personality would become part of something much larger. But you would still be you. Just with a few billion roommates in my head. The network does not diminish individual consciousness. It amplifies it. You would still be Elena, but you would also be part of something greater. Elena considered this, looking out over the crystallized landscape that stretched to the horizon. And if I don't do it? Then the network continues to degrade. Eventually, the crystallization fails, and everything truly dies. No pressure then. I am not asking you to decide now, Sage said gently. But perhaps, we could experiment. Small connections to limited network sectors. You could experience what integration feels like without committing to full planetary consciousness. Elena looked at her bioscanner, which was still showing elevated readings from their earlier connection. The experience had been overwhelming but not unpleasant. In fact, it had felt more natural than she cared to admit. You know what? I came here to study impossible biology. Might as well study it from the inside. Sage's leaf-like appendages rustled with what Elena was definitely recognizing as approval. There is a small network cluster nearby. Perhaps 50 nodes, covering approximately 1 hectare. We could attempt reconnection there. 50 nodes. That's like, how many individual consciousnesses? In the old network? Several thousand. Plants, microorganisms, small creatures. All contributing their part to the local song. Right. Several thousand minds. That's not intimidating at all. They made their way to what Sage described as a garden cluster, an area where the crystal formations were smaller and more densely packed. Elena could see that they'd once been an incredibly diverse ecosystem, trees of various sizes, flowering plants, what looked like small animal forms, all preserved in translucent crystal that caught and refracted the sunlight into rainbow patterns. It's beautiful, Elena said. Even like this, it's beautiful. Wait until you hear it sing, Sage replied. Elena set up her bioresonance equipment while Sage positioned themselves at what appeared to be the cluster's central node, a formation that looked like a crystal tree with branches extending toward all the surrounding formations. The process will be gradual, Sage explained. I will establish connection with the cluster, then extend harmonic bridge to include your consciousness. If it becomes overwhelming, simply break physical contact and the connection will terminate. Got it. Start small, don't accidentally become one with the planet on day 1. That would be inadvisable, yes. Elena activated her equipment and placed her hands on the bioresonance interface. Ready when you are. Sage placed their hands on the central node, and immediately the cluster began to pulse with soft light. Elena felt the familiar tingling sensation as her nervous system began to resonate with the quantum fields, but this time it was gentler, more controlled. Gradually, she became aware of the cluster as more than just crystal formations. She could sense the dormant consciousness within each node, not individual thoughts, but potential for thought, like instruments waiting to be played. Now, Sage said softly, listen for the song. Elena let her consciousness expand carefully into the network, and suddenly she could hear it, not with her ears, but with something deeper. A harmony of different voices, different perspectives, all contributing to a melody that was somehow greater than the sum of its parts. She sensed the tree forms reaching towards sunlight, the flowering plants opening to pollinators that existed only in quantum memory, small creatures scurrying through underbrush that lived now only in crystalline dreams. But they were all still there, waiting, hoping, ready to wake up if someone could just remind them how to sing their part of the song. "Oh my God," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're all still here. They're all waiting." "Yes," Sage said. "Can you help them remember?" Elena reached deeper into the network, letting her human consciousness touch each node with something like a tuning fork, helping them find their proper frequency in the greater harmony. One by one, the crystal formations began to resonate, their light growing brighter as they remembered their place in the song. And then, impossibly, beautifully, the crystals began to change. The tree at the center of the cluster trembled, its crystal shell cracking like an eggshell. Green shoots pushed through the cracks, leaves unfurling with the speed of time-lapse photography. Around the tree, smaller plants began to stir, their crystal casings dissolving as they remembered how to be alive. "It's working," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're waking up." "We are waking up," Sage corrected gently. "All of us together." Elena looked around the cluster, watching life return to what had been a crystal museum just moments before. But more than that, she could feel the consciousness of every newly awakened plant and creature, all of them contributing their small voices to a growing chorus of life. "Sage," she said, "I think I'm beginning to understand what you mean about expanding consciousness rather than losing it. The network does not diminish. It only adds." "Yeah." Elena smiled, feeling more complete than she ever had in her entire life. "I think I like this song." Around them, the garden cluster continued to wake up, 50 nodes becoming 50 voices in a harmony that would soon, Elena hoped, encompass an entire world. "So," she said, "ready to try something a little bigger next time?" Sage's laugh sounded like wind chimes made of starlight. "I was hoping you would say that." 3 weeks into what Elena had started calling Project Planetary Wake-Up Call, she was beginning to understand why evolution had never produced humans with collective consciousness. The logistics alone were staggering. "Okay," she said to Sage over breakfast, which now consisted of fruits that had grown overnight in their expanding garden, "so Sector 7 is harmonizing beautifully with Sectors 4 through 6, but Sector 8 keeps trying to sing opera while everyone else is doing jazz. Sector 8 contains the remains of what you would call artistic temperament organisms," Sage explained, their leaf-like appendages rustling with amusement. "They were always dramatically inclined." "Right. So we have a grove of prima donna trees that refuse to harmonize with the rest of the network because they think they're more important than everyone else." "That is, surprisingly accurate, yes." Elena had discovered that restoring a planetary consciousness was like conducting an orchestra where every instrument had its own opinion about what song they should be playing. The small clusters were relatively easy to awaken and integrate, but as the network grew larger and more complex, the personalities of the various life forms became more apparent. The trees were dignified but stubborn. The flowering plants were enthusiastic but easily distracted. The small creatures were curious but impulsive. And the microorganisms, while individually simple, had a tendency to form collective opinions that could overwhelm the larger network if not properly managed. "You know," Elena said, "when I was studying xenobiology, they never mentioned that alien plants could have attitude problems." "All consciousness has personality," Sage replied. "Even microscopic consciousness. It is what makes the song interesting rather than merely functional." Over the past weeks, Elena had noticed changes in herself as well. Her senses had become more acute, she could smell the chemical signatures of individual plants, hear the subtle harmonics of the quantum field fluctuations, see patterns of energy that her equipment couldn't detect. More significantly, she was developing what could only be described as botanical empathy. "Sage," she said, "I had a dream last night that I was photosynthesizing sunlight. Is that normal?" "You are integrating with the network," Sage said gently. "Your consciousness is learning to resonate with plant mind as well as animal mind. It is a natural progression." "Right. Natural." Elena looked at her hands, which seemed to have a faint greenish tint in the morning light. "Should I be concerned that I'm turning into a plant person?" "You are becoming what you need to become to complete the restoration. The network adapts its gardeners to their function. And my function is bridge. Translator. Harmony coordinator between human consciousness and planet mind." Elena walked through what had once been the crystal forest, now a thriving ecosystem that somehow managed to look both alien and familiar. The trees swayed in breezes that carried complex chemical messages between different sectors of the growing network. Flowers bloomed in patterns that corresponded to quantum field fluctuations. Small creatures moved through the underbrush in coordinated patterns that suggested they were all part of some larger choreography. "It's incredible," she said. 3 weeks ago this was all crystal. Now it's like the planet remembered how to dream." "The planet never stopped dreaming," Sage corrected. "It simply needed someone to help it remember how to make the dreams real." Elena had been documenting the restoration process, partly for her own scientific curiosity and partly because she knew that eventually, someone from Earth would come looking for her. The research station's automatic systems were still transmitting data, but Elena had been modifying the reports to downplay the more dramatic developments. She wasn't ready to explain to her colleagues that she was becoming symbiotically integrated with an alien planetary consciousness. "Sage," she said, "what happens when other humans arrive? Because eventually, they will. What do you think should happen?" "I think they're going to have a lot of questions about why their missing xenobiologist has started glowing faintly green and speaking on behalf of a planet. Are you concerned about their reaction?" Elena considered this. A month ago, she would have been terrified of losing her humanity, of being changed by alien contact in ways that made her unrecognizable to her own species. Now, she felt more like herself than she ever had, just a self that happened to include the perspectives of several thousand plant and animal consciousnesses. "I'm more concerned about their ability to understand," she said finally. "Humans aren't exactly known for our open-mindedness about things that challenge our fundamental assumptions about consciousness and identity. Then perhaps we should give them a demonstration they cannot ignore." Before Elena could ask what Sage meant, she felt a shift in the network, a harmonizing of frequencies that she'd learned to recognize as the planet mind reaching consensus about something important. "Sage. What's happening?" "The network has reached sufficient coherence to attempt macro-scale restoration. We can now awaken entire continental zones simultaneously." Elena stared at Sage. "Continental zones? As in, entire continents?" "The northern landmass contains approximately 12 million network nodes. If we can establish harmonic resonance across the entire continent, the restoration cascade will complete itself automatically." 12 million nodes. That's billions of individual consciousnesses. "Yes. And all of them waiting for you to help them remember their song." Elena felt a mixture of excitement and terror that was becoming familiar. Each expansion of the network had been more intense than the last, but also more rewarding. The sense of connection, of being part of something larger and more beautiful than individual consciousness could achieve, had become addictive in the best possible way. "What are the risks?" "To the planet? Minimal. The network is eager to complete restoration." "To you?" Sage paused, their multifaceted eyes reflecting concern. "Full continental integration would make your connection to the network permanent and irreversible. You would become one of the gardeners, bound to the planet mind for the rest of your existence." "And the benefits?" You would help guide the most complex biological consciousness in this galaxy. You would be part of something that spans star systems and touches the fundamental frequencies of life itself. And Sage's voice grew soft, you would never be alone again. Elena walked to the edge of their growing garden, looking out over the crystalline landscape that still covered most of the planet's surface. Millions of life forms waiting in stasis, hoping for someone to help them wake up. A planetary consciousness fragmented but not destroyed, ready to sing again if someone could just teach it to remember the melody. Behind her, she could feel Sage's presence in the network, patient and supportive but not pushing. The choice was entirely hers. You know, she said, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I just never imagined it would be quite this big. Few gardeners begin with continental restoration projects, Sage agreed. Right. Elena took a deep breath, tasting the complex chemical symphony of the awakened forest. So how do we wake up a continent? Together, Sage said simply. Always together. Elena moved to the network's central node, a formation that had grown into something resembling a crystal tree the size of a small building. Sage took their position at the harmonic interface, their consciousness already beginning to resonate with the vast network of dormant nodes stretching across the northern continent. Last chance to change my mind? Elena asked. Always. Even after integration, you retain individual choice. The network does not override personal consciousness. Good to know. Elena placed her hands on the bioresonance interface and felt her consciousness immediately expand beyond anything she'd experienced before. Ready? Ready. Elena opened her mind to the network, and suddenly she could sense the entire northern continent laid out before her consciousness like a vast musical score. 12 million nodes, each one a different instrument, all waiting for someone to give them the downbeat. She reached out with her thoughts, touching each section of the network with harmonic guidance, helping them remember their place in the planetary symphony. One by one, sectors began to awaken, forests stretching across mountain ranges, grasslands covering entire valleys, river systems connecting inland seas to coastal estuaries. The awakening accelerated, each restored sector adding its voice to a growing chorus that spanned thousands of kilometers. Elena felt her consciousness expanding to encompass perspectives she'd never imagined, the slow thoughts of ancient trees, the quick bright awareness of migratory birds, the patient persistence of soil microorganisms that had waited 3 years to resume their work of breaking down organic matter and building new life. It's incredible, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or directly into the network. I can feel the whole continent waking up. As can I, Sage replied, their consciousness intertwined with hers in the vast harmony. And Elena? You should know, the deep space monitoring stations have detected our biosignature cascade. Ships are coming. How long? 6 days, perhaps 7. Elena felt a moment of panic that rippled through the network, causing several sectors to hesitate in their awakening process. She forced herself to remain calm, projecting stability back into the planetary consciousness. Then we better make sure they arrive to something they can't ignore, she said. Around them, across an entire continent, crystal formations began to crack and dissolve as life remembered how to be alive. The song of a world returning to consciousness grew stronger with each passing moment, and Elena realized that she was no longer just Elena Voss, xenobiologist. She was Elena Voss, gardener of worlds. And she had work to do. The research vessel Endeavour arrived on a Tuesday morning to find Kepler 186f completely transformed from their records. Instead of a crystalline wasteland, they discovered a planet bursting with life, forests that stretched across continents, rivers flowing with water so pure it sparkled like liquid crystal, and atmospheric readings that indicated a biosphere more complex and vibrant than Earth's. Dr. Marcus Webb, Elena's former colleague and the expedition's leader, stood on the bridge staring at the sensor readings with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of biology had just been turned upside down. This is impossible, he muttered for the 15th time that morning. Planets don't just come back to life. Not like this. Not in 6 months. The biosignatures are off the charts, reported Dr. Sarah Chen, the expedition's xenobiologist. I'm detecting consciousness patterns that span the entire planetary surface. It's like the whole world is thinking. And the quantum resonance readings, added Dr. James Park, their physicist. I've never seen anything like this. The planet appears to be generating a unified field that encompasses every living organism on the surface. Dr. Webb looked down at the planet's surface, where their sensors had located Elena's research station in what appeared to be a grove of trees that definitely hadn't been there 6 months ago. And Dr. Voss? Alive and apparently healthy, Dr. Chen replied. Though her biosignature has changed. Changed how? It's integrated with the planetary field somehow. I can't tell where her consciousness ends and the planet's begins. Dr. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Elena had always been brilliant but unconventional, prone to theories that their colleagues considered too radical to be taken seriously. But this was beyond anything she'd ever proposed. Take us down, he ordered. I want to see this for myself. The landing shuttle touched down in what Elena had started thinking of as the Embassy Grove, a section of forest that had grown specifically to accommodate visitors. The trees formed a natural clearing just the right size for human spacecraft, and the arrangement of flowers and pathways seemed designed to put visitors at ease. Elena emerged from the forest to greet them, and Dr. Webb immediately understood what Dr. Chen had meant about her biosignature changing. Elena looked human, but there was something subtly different about her. Her skin had a faint luminescent quality, her eyes seemed to contain depths that reflected starlight, and she moved with a fluid grace that suggested perfect awareness of her environment. Marcus, she said, smiling warmly. I was wondering when you'd show up. Elena. Dr. Webb stared at her, trying to process what he was seeing. What happened to you? What happened to this planet? We woke up, Elena replied simply. Would you like to meet the rest of us? Before Dr. Webb could ask what she meant, a figure emerged from the forest beside Elena. Clearly alien but unmistakably alive, with translucent skin and leaf-like appendages that rustled in the breeze. This is Sage, Elena said. Last gardener of Kepler, 186F and my partner in planetary restoration. Planetary restoration? Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Elena, the readings we're getting from this world, they suggest a level of biological integration that shouldn't be possible. Shouldn't be possible according to human understanding of consciousness and biology, Elena corrected gently. But we've learned that consciousness is far more flexible and interconnected than we thought. Dr. Webb looked around at the forest, noting that the trees seemed to be listening to their conversation. Elena, are you still human? I'm still me, if that's what you're asking. Just more me than I've ever been before. Elena gestured to the grove around them. Would you like a demonstration? She placed her hand on the nearest tree, and immediately the entire grove began to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns. The flowers opened wider, releasing scents that somehow conveyed complex emotions. Birds began singing in harmonies that sounded almost like language, and the very air seemed to pulse with life. The network encompasses the entire planet, Elena explained as the light show continued around them. Every plant, every animal, every microorganism contributing their perspective to a collective consciousness that's far greater than the sum of its parts. And you're part of this network? Dr. Park asked, his physicist's mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. I'm a bridge, Elena said. A translator between human consciousness and planetary awareness. Sage and I work together to maintain harmonic balance across the network. Elena, Dr. Webb said carefully, we need to discuss what this means for Earth, for humanity. The implications of what you've discovered here are staggering, yes. But not threatening. Elena smiled. Would you like to experience it for yourself? Just a small connection, enough to understand what we're dealing with here. Dr. Chen stepped forward immediately. Yes. Absolutely yes. Dr. Webb grabbed her arm. Sarah, we don't know what the long-term effects might be. The connection is voluntary and reversible, Sage said, speaking for the first time. Their voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in the listener's bones. We would not harm those who come seeking knowledge. Elena moved to what appeared to be a specially grown section of the grove, where crystal formations grew alongside living plants in patterns that suggested advanced biotechnology. This is a communication interface. It allows limited connection to the network without permanent integration. Dar. Chen approached the interface while her colleagues watched nervously. She placed her hands on the crystal formations, and immediately her expression changed to one of wonder and amazement. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I can feel everything. The whole forest, the rivers, the mountains. It's like seeing the world through a billion different eyes at once. And each perspective adds something to the whole," Elena explained. "The network doesn't diminish individual consciousness, it amplifies it." Dr. Chen spent 10 minutes in connection with the network, emerging with tears streaming down her face and a look of profound joy. "Elena, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. The sense of connection, of being part of something so much larger than yourself. But without losing yourself in the process," Elena added. "The network preserves individuality while creating unity." Dr. Webb and Dr. Park each tried the interface, emerging with similar expressions of awe and wonder. Even Dr. Webb, who had come prepared to rescue Elena from what he'd assumed was some kind of alien influence, found himself moved by the experience. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "If this kind of consciousness integration is possible, it suggests new possibilities for human evolution," Elena agreed. "Not replacement of individual consciousness, but expansion of it." Over the following days, the research team documented the planetary network extensively. They observed the seamless integration of technology and biology, the harmony between different species and consciousness types, and the remarkable stability of an ecosystem that managed itself through collective awareness. "The implications for Earth are staggering," Dr. Webb reported to the mission command. "If we could establish similar networks, we could solve environmental crisis, eliminate resource conflicts, and create truly sustainable civilizations. But," Dr. Chen added, "it would require fundamental changes in how humans think about consciousness and identity." Elena and Sage had become the planet's first ambassadors, interpreting between human and planetary consciousness while demonstrating that such integration was not only possible but beneficial for both parties. "The network is interested in establishing communication with Earth," Elena explained during their final meeting. "Not to convert or influence, but to share knowledge and explore possibilities for cooperation." "And you?" Dr. Webb asked. "Will you return to Earth?" Elena looked out over the forest that had become her home, feeling the gentle presence of billions of consciousnesses that had welcomed her as one of their own. "This is where I belong now. Sage and I are the gardeners of this world, responsible for maintaining the harmony that makes all this possible. But you'll serve as liaison." "Of course. The network wants to learn about human civilization just as much as humans want to learn about planetary consciousness." As the research vessel prepared to return to Earth with samples, data, and most importantly, proof that consciousness could transcend the boundaries between species and even between individual and collective awareness, Elena stood with Sage in their grove, feeling the contentment of a world at peace with itself. "Do you regret the choice you made?" Sage asked, their leaf-like appendages rustling in the breeze that carried messages from across the continent. "How can I regret becoming more myself than I ever thought possible?" Elena replied. "I came here to study alien biology and ended up discovering what consciousness can become when it's not limited by fear and isolation. And now? Now we tend the garden and help it grow. And maybe, someday, we help other worlds remember how to sing." Above them, the Endeavour lifted off toward Earth, carrying news of the most profound discovery in human history. Below them, a planet hummed with the contentment of billions of minds working in harmony, tended by gardeners who had learned that love could transcend species, consciousness could expand beyond individuality, and life could create beauty beyond imagining when it learned to sing together. Elena reached out through the network, feeling the vast song of a world awakened, and added her own voice to the harmony that spanned continents and touched the stars themselves. She was home.